Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let me get my hat on, and let's get this started. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, I've started going on long walks as my form of LISS cardio. I walk about 1 to 2 hours a day. People say walking doesn't burn many calories, but since I started walking a lot more, I've seen a drop in the scale. I think it's a good calorie burner for me personally because I still carry about 60 pounds of extra body fat, so it's like walking with a weighted vest. What's your opinion? Brother, my opinion is that what you're doing is fine. And here's the thing. People are going to try to argue with you it doesn't burn calories. It won't help you lose weight. Really? Would any registered dietitian or weight loss expert tell you that? Meaning, who are you getting this advice from? From a bunch of bodybuilders? You know, a lot of them do LISS cardio too for contest prep, so I don't even think they're the ones telling you that, to be honest. I don't think they're the ones telling you that. But you're seeing the results yourself. You started walking more, and the scale started going down. If you're holding 60 pounds of extra body fat, you are right. It's like carrying a 60-pound vest around. You know what? LISS cardio improves your health, has a documented health improving effect, has a documented impact on calorie burn. You know, people say, oh, well, you might only be burning an extra 300 calories, 400 calories doing what you're doing. Well, if you're maintaining your weight and you're eating the same amount of food and you burn 300 to 400 calories every day, that's almost an entire pound of fat burned off every week. If you were at your previous maintenance calories roughly, and you do that, you would lose almost a pound a week. So people who say, well, that's not much. Yeah, for someone who's obese, losing an extra pound of body fat a week, who wants to lose 60 pounds over time, that could contribute anywhere from a year to a year and a half will contribute and actually help them reach their goal is the only lifestyle change they actually have to make. So anyone who says burning an extra 300 calories a day through low intensity cardio, or even 400 or 500, because I don't know what you weigh, you could be burning 500 calories in a 2-hour little walk. It could be more. Anyone who says that that doesn't count, when we know it improves health markers, it improves health, we know it burns calories, quite frankly, I wouldn't listen to that person. They really don't know what they're talking about. It absolutely works. I mean, by that same token, you know, you get people who are like, well, your bike riding doesn't do anything, but it's like the scale's gone down. I'm down 14 pounds. And the biggest change I made was up my cardio. I increased my LISS cardio. Scale's down 14 pounds over, you know what, maybe 3 months at this point? Something like that. Somewhere in that range. I'm not sure. I lost count of the weeks because it doesn't matter. Same thing. So who cares what these people say? If you do it, all the top experts, dietitians, medical doctors, everyone else say it's a good idea and it works. And you're trying it and it works, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time worried about what a bunch of yahoos say about it. Because they clearly aren't looking at what the best experts in the world are saying. And you're finding in the real world that it works just like the best experts say. So keep it up. Alright, next question. Is the Sumo Deadlift an acceptable alternative given it significantly reduces range of motion compared to the conventional deadlift for those of us with Macroorchidism and short T-Rex arms? Would I be better off doing something else if my focus is in the brutal strength, building strength and explosiveness? Alright, for those not sure what the other condition he mentioned is, it's also called Fragile X syndrome. One of the side effects is that people have enlarged testicles. And I'm assuming he's making a reference to the bar hitting him in the balls. That could be a problem. You know, adjust your technique accordingly. The Sumo Deadlift isn't necessarily the best thing here. What I tell people is actually people with short arms need to stick to normal conventional deadlifts, and they need to avoid deficit deadlifts. People with longer arms will oftentimes get a little better hypertrophy from increasing the range of motion with a deficit. But just having short arms, no, stick to conventional deadlifts. The Sumo Deadlift, you're shortening the range of motion and you're changing the muscles involved. I feel the conventional deadlift is going to give you the best overall posterior chain development, best athleticism, and think about that from a strength and athleticism perspective. In any real world environment that you can think of, are you likely to be in a sumo stance when you need to use power? I mean, when someone gets hit on a playing field, or even in a MMA fight or a boxing match or anything else, what's their stance look like? If you had to guess, is it closer to a conventional stance or maybe a slightly wider than normal conventional stance? Or are they way out with toes pointed outward, all the way out with a 4 foot, 5 foot spread on their feet? Come on. No, most real world endeavors, if you're going to train for that sort of thing, you're going to be in closer to a conventional stance than you are to a sumo stance. Therefore, specificity of training states that you're more likely to have better carryover from the conventional stance. And it doesn't have to be perfect, guys. Your stances on squats and deadlifts and stuff don't have to be perfectly matching what you're doing in a real world environment or a sporting environment. They don't have to be perfect. They can be off by 4 or 5 inches and still get 100% carryover. Because that's the thing you need to remember when it comes to these lever arms and joint angle specificities. You get carryover up to 15% joint angle. After that, it starts to deteriorate. But you're more likely to be within 15 degrees of joint angle with a conventional than you are with a sumo in any of these real world endeavors. So no, conventional all the way. All right, next question. Can you touch on the role of glycogen in fat loss? Can one lose fat with near full glycogen stores the whole time? And how often should one refeed when on a 500 calorie deficit? Alright, this gets overrated as if people have the ability to really control it. If you have full glycogen stores all the time, you probably aren't going to lose much, if any, body fat. Why? Because you're not in a calorie deficit. Alright, you're not in a calorie deficit. When you go into a calorie deficit, even a small one, what's the first thing that happens? You see an immediate drop in scale weight. Why? It's water loss. Because your glycogen stores are slightly depleted all the time if you're in a calorie deficit. Now, they're going to be fuller if you're eating more carbs than a lower carb diet, but your glycogen stores are going to be slightly depleted anytime you're in a caloric deficit, and they're going to be fuller anytime you're overeating, as long as you're getting enough carbs, obviously. So in that context, it's not the glycogen stores themselves that are causing it. It's your total energy turnover and intake. That's what's going on there. So to put that in perspective, if glycogen stores are going to tend to be full all the time when you're overeating or close to full, and they're going to be slightly reduced when you're in a caloric deficit, where should your focus be? Meaning it's the caloric deficit and overfeeding that cause the fat loss and fat gain. Okay, it's not the state of the glycogen stores. The glycogen stores are a side effect of it that you really shouldn't worry about that much. People way overthink this stuff. Oh, should I deplete my glycogen stores before I do whatever cardio to lose more fat? No, as you're going to lose more muscle too that way. I mean, if you were to really think it through to its furthest conclusions, what is it that what sort of cardio you're doing? What are you trying to burn here? You know, what are your goals? And so in that context, I would say don't worry about it. People micromanage stuff that doesn't matter. They do it way, way too much. As far as the refeeding goes, I don't know. Refeeds are subjective. People need to understand 500 calorie deficit, if you're not particularly lean, refeeding isn't going to be necessary that often. It may not even be required at all. The purpose of refeeding is to improve performance and to minimize muscle loss. Okay? If you're not experiencing a significant loss in performance in the weight room, then do you really need to refeed? No. No, you don't need to refeed at all. Now, a lot of people say, well, it's to help you stay on your diet better. No, you know it works better. This is documented, and every weight loss expert will tell you this, even a lot of these guys who are prep bodybuilders. If you don't have a reason you need to maintain your diet, you don't have an event coming in 16 weeks or 20 weeks where you have to look a certain way, a photo shoot or something, don't run your diet too long. Take a diet break for a couple of weeks. Go back to maintenance calories for 2 or 3 weeks. That way, it gives your body time to play catch up. It gives you a psychological and hormonal break from the dieting so that you don't have to continue to experience the increased hunger, the increased cortisol, everything else that comes from long-term dieting. And unless you're morbidly obese, in which case your health takes top priority, that you need to diet all the way until you're no longer morbidly obese, don't spend a lot of time worrying about about the refeeds and everything. If you need to take a diet break, then take a diet break. Refeeding is really for people who are trying to maintain peak performance and peak muscle mass, who are in a prolonged period of time of losing body fat, who are having to do so because they can't afford to take a diet break. Okay, that's the whole point. People who can't afford a diet break. Because they have to be at X body fat or X body weight by a certain day. For whatever sort of reason. All right, next question. Is there a benefit to putting the big compound movements of a workout at the end and using isolation work to warm up, or would it generally be better to do a warm up within the big lifts than accessory work? How could isolation movements warm you up? Your body temperature is already up to speed. If you're up and moving around, your body is warmed up. The purpose of warming up is to prime the nervous system. And for people who have mobility problems, to get your mobility and stuff sorted. But that's another issue that you need to work on entirely. If you're having to use your warm-ups to improve your mobility enough to perform your basic heavy exercises, that means that you need to work on your general mobility more. That's my opinion, by the way. No, the purpose of warm-ups is to prime your nervous system to do the big movements. Using isolation movements before a compound is going to make you weaker on the compounds. A warm-up should make you stronger. That's the whole point. Meaning, if a warm-up doesn't make you stronger and able to lift more weight or do more reps, it wasn't an appropriate warm-up. Warm-up is there to prime the nervous system, to improve performance so that you're primed to do your work sets because you have the bar path down, you've got all the neural pathways basically warmed up to get you ready to perform those exercises. That's the whole point. That's what's going on. That's why you do a warm-up. I know that's a controversial statement, but that's reality. So that being said, if anything, doing isolation movements first is going to reduce performance. It's going to reduce the gains you get, and in some cases give you a higher chance of injury because you fatigued a really small support muscle and then you're going to hit it with a bigger, heavier movement. Sometimes that can cause injuries, tears, things like that. So I'm going to say no, don't do that at all. Do your warm-up. Do your big compounds and do your isolation and accessory movements after. There's a reason every strength and conditioning coach in the world trains their athletes that way. It's not because they haven't thought of trying something different. It's because they know what they're doing. All right, there's an enormous difference there. Don't deviate from the things that we know that work with ideas like that. It's not going to help you in the long term unless you have a really, really good reason to do so. All right, next question. From an athletic power perspective, what weight is ideal to be moved? You mentioned there are no performance advantages of more than a double body weight squat in American football. What about bench, push, press, and row? I don't know of any strength standards set for that, and the reason these standards are set that way probably is not what you're thinking. It's not that you wouldn't get more performance from being stronger on the squat. All right. It's that these people have sport-specific training and goals. And what we usually find, usually around a double body weight squat, to exceed that requires a stronger focus on the exercise. Well, if you're focusing on an exercise that you're only doing for certain performance carryover to your sport, and you have a multifaceted sport like American football that requires a certain amount of speed, agility, endurance, everything else, in addition to all these sport-specific movements and skills, the squat-specific training, because again, you can use general training to get to a double bodyweight squat. You don't have to do squat specialization. For most people to exceed the double bodyweight squat, they have to do a squat specialized program. They have to focus heavily on the squat in a specialized program. That will reduce their ability to do the extra sport-specific training. It will start to cut into all their recovery that will affect their ability to train all the components that they need. That's the problem. Bench press can be similar. Same thing, probably 1.5 times body weight bench. Probably in that range. Would be something similar, but I don't think that it's been studied as much because we don't have a lot of coaches who spend a lot of time looking at those body weight multipliers on these other exercises. But so the point with that is that this is just what's been noted by coaches over the years, that athletes who focus on their squat enough to surpass that sometimes impedes their overall performance because it eats up too much of their training time, too much of their recovery, and they're not able to train all the skills that they need for a multifaceted sport like football. But until they get to that double body weight squat, continuing to get stronger on the squat does seem to enhance their overall performance, because the squat carries over to a couple of different endeavors that they need, such as speed, power, it affects sprint times, everything else. But beyond that, it starts to contribute to those less and less, and requires you to devote more and more time and recovery to it. And that's what's going on there. So hopefully that makes more sense. And that's the same of any exercise. You could focus too much on one exercise to the point to where it starts to interfere with your ability to learn the full skill set that you need for any given sport. So strength isn't always the best thing. It isn't always something that you should pursue with maximum effort for every sport. That some people need to be good at multiple things, in which case an excessive focus on getting strong on one exercise could interfere with that. All right, next question. Hey Jason, what are your thoughts on Tabata workouts? Was thinking about using them after my workouts or maybe on my off days, trying to cut down. Do you think this is a good strategy? Currently do full body 3 to 4 times a week. Thanks. Honestly, again, this is going to be one of those where people say, well, I don't want to take advice from Jason because he's not ripped. I'm not that big of a fan of this sort of cardio or conditioning work purely for fat loss. I'm not saying it can't work. It works better for people on gear. All right, most of the people who do large amounts of barbell complexes in addition to their strength work to create a caloric deficit, they usually have a very high work capacity, largely enhanced due to their drugs. Most people who aren't blasting a lot of gear should probably put a little more focus in their LISS cardio to create a deficit, because they're going to need the recovery to handle their normal weight training. And that's the problem we run into with this. You've got to remember, a lot of these methods that people talk about, various types of HIIT cardio and stuff, they say, oh, it builds muscle. It doesn't build muscle for people who already have a muscle base built from weight training. It doesn't improve their size at all. All right, because it's such a lower threshold of anabolic stimulus to the muscle tissue that it doesn't produce meaningful amounts. So what it does do is eat into your recovery. And what you have to balance out when you're in a calorie deficit and your strength training, how much recovery do you have to spare towards your fat burning endeavors? And LISS cardio tends to be less fatiguing, require less recovery per calorie burned. And that's the only reason I state that. I'm not saying it doesn't work, because from a time perspective, barbell complexes, interval training, stuff like that, actually burns a lot more calories per minute spent doing it. Okay, so if you're trying to do this with as little work in the gym as possible or as short a time as possible in terms of a time commitment, it absolutely can work. But you can oftentimes pay the end on the recovery end. It requires more careful programming of your overall training in order to utilize it. So it has a less margin of error for all that. And that's really the problem you run into. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's what people need to understand. It's not saying it's bad or wrong or you're stupid if you do it or anything like that. That's not the case. We're just pointing out it requires more careful programming, and you could pay a bigger price if you mess it up. All right, next question. Jason, I understand your thoughts on supplements in general. However, what do you think about yohimbine? Research has shown that it may assist in fat loss spots. Yohimbine isn't a supplement. Yohimbine's a drug. So I don't understand why you're asking that. As far as I know, I don't think supplement companies even allowed to sell yohimbine, or is it a research chemical? Now, I'm pretty sure it falls under research chemicals. And the people who get the best benefit from yohimbine, in my experience, my observations, everything else, are the people who don't use the oral versions. They pin it directly into the fat they want to lose. Okay, that's where the best results come from yohimbine. And it's been noted over the years. But, you know, obviously you carry risks there. So as far as that goes, I don't know why we're talking about non-supplements. We're talking about drugs. Yohimbine HCl is a drug and oftentimes sold legally as a research chemical. Really not a supplement at all. So I'm not sure where we're going with this. That'd be like asking me, do pro-hormones work? Well, yeah, some of them do. But they're drugs. They're not actually dietary supplements. They're not usually allowed to be classified that way. All right, next question. And last question of the week. Hi Jason, I've started power cleaning a couple months ago and I'm seeing massive improvements in my athleticism. I love to do weighted chin-ups and my back work consists of power cleans 3x5 and weighted chins 3x5 every other day. I enjoy the power clean so much it's totally replaced my deadlift. How can I program in deadlifts if I still want to power clean every training session? I'm seeing way better results concentrating on push, pressing, power clean than I was concentrating on the squat and deadlift. Thanks. You know what? Bill Starr and a lot of these other coaches who wanted football players to focus on the power cleans more have you only do one set of deadlifts a week. Not that hard. Come in and do one peak set of deadlifts. The power clean will build your deadlift. Front squat will build your deadlift. So what I would say to you, if you want to focus on athleticism, don't drop squats completely. You need to probably do front squats. But between the front squat and the power clean, your deadlift will get the accessories it needs to go up just fine, even if you're only doing it for one working set a week. And that's been noted by a lot of coaches over the years because, yeah, it's very difficult to do a heavy deadlift focus and a heavy power clean focus. And like you noted, if you're finding the power cleans improving your athleticism, the push press, all that, you can't focus too much on the deadlift, but you can come in and do a good work set of deadlifts once a week. Do a heavy triple, you can do a heavy 5-rep set. Yeah, that'll work out just fine. It works real good that way. Totally doable, totally time proven in the real world with real athletes. So look into what guys like Bill Starr and other people have had people do with that, going all the way back decades ago. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.